Write the L. Let's hear it.
犯罪者殺しが止まれば樋口がキラの力を持っていると考えて間違いないしかしアマネがヤガミライトのためにある程度やってくれると考えていたが犯罪者殺しまで止まってしまったら肝心の殺し方を見るのが難しくなる、何か策を考えなければ。こういうのも手柄って言うんでしょうか、松田さん。
しかしこの状況ではまだ殺し方がわからない。
そうなんですよね。どうして殺してるかが欲しい。
そして犯罪者の死が止まったらその殺し方が見られない。そうだ。
Right?
はい。どうせ樋口を捕まえるにしても犯罪者が死ななくなったと断定してからです。
御堂、波川、樋口の家は普通のセキュリティじゃない。特に樋口は電波を遮断した地下室を最近作っていて私でも侵入に2日を要した。うわ、もっと早くこの盗聴やられてたらやばかった。
Yeah.
八神君、話が戻って悪いんですが、
Okay.
もう単刀直入に聞きます。殺したことを覚えていますか？
まだそんなこと言ってるのか。僕はキラーじゃない。何度言えばわかる。
質問に答えてください。覚えていますか？
覚えてない。
八神ライトはキラだった。そしてキラの力は他に渡った。今八神ライトはキラだったということを忘れている。これを前提にした分析です。そういう考え方はできますか？
ああ、やってみよう。
Ooh, I like this. Okay.
八神ライトはキラだった。そしてキラの力は人に渡った。これは八神ライトの意志で渡ったのか、それとも八神ライトの裏にキラの力を与えていた者がいて、八神ライトから他の人間に移したのか。
This should be interesting.
その前提なら八神ライトの意志だ。
そうですよね。与えたり移せたりできる人間が裏にいて殺し方を知られたくないのなら、あのギリギリまで他に移さなかったのも
How about that?
天から見通せるようなものの存在を認めたら、そんなものは捕まえようがないし、私はとっくに殺されているか、永遠に手のひらの上で遊ばれ続けるか、そんなものの存在などありえない。八神ライトがキラであったとしても、キラの力は力を持った者の意志でしか動かない。八神君、おかげで 99% はすっきりしました。樋口が自分から人に力を渡さない状況を作って殺し方を見せてもらいます。
どうするんだ？
桜テレビを使って樋口を引っ掛けます。
ドッキリテレビだ。
何それ？
デメ側が今でも毎週やっているキラ特番。番組の最後までにはキラが誰なのか発表するという。
そんなの信じるかな。それも桜テレビでしょ。だいたい樋口がその番組見ないかもしれないし。
波川に連絡して樋口にまずい、すぐにテレビを見ろと電話させるだけでいい。
なるほど、アイバーを使うんだ。実はスパイだってバラしちゃうんですね。
全然違います。アイバーは使いません。樋口がそのテレビ番組の出演者を見て殺せると思えるものでないとダメです。つまり名前を調べようとすればすぐ調べられそうなもの。
そんな人いますかね？
松田さんしかいない。
松田か。
樋口はその発表とシルエットからでも松井マネージャーと気づくでしょう。さらに局のミスで一瞬すりガラスの向こうの人物の顔が映ってしまう。
面白そう。
そして番組終了までにはキラである H の本名を発表するという。
この状況では樋口は1秒でも早く名前を知ることしか考えられない。樋口の動きは予想できる。
そして殺し方を確認。今のところこの策に問題があるとすれば、もし樋口が第二のキラのように顔だけ
Right,
で
the
殺せる
Shinigami eyes. They don't know about that.
松田さんが死にます。
That's a risk.
それも今松田さんが生きていること、ミサを欲しがっていることから多分ないだろう。
やるかどうかはその間に松田さん自身が決めてください。
He'll accept.
23日なんていりませんよ。やらせてください。
That's key. I'm gonna have to come back to that. Namikawa. They've been showing that guy a lot.
何の相談だ。
誰がキラだと思う？
それを聞いてどうするんだ。大体志村かもしれないし、御堂かもしれないじゃないか。
みんなキラに殺されるのを恐れて 合わせてるだけだ。
Interesting.
しかしこのまま続けていったっていつかは世間にバレる。いや、そうならなければ終わらない。
逆に聞くが、
I think he knows.
キラだと思う。
He always kept looking.
高橋か樋口。
He's close.
高橋はキラの引き立て役だ。キラより考えの浅い者もいないとまずい。
みんな大体分かってるんじゃない
Yeah.
か。
It's pretty-
樋口だろうな。
羽鳥が死んだ後の会議中電話がかかってきただろ
Oh.
あれはなんだ？
I like this guy.
志村、お前
Yeah, I was gonna say he's
本当
quite
に
sharp.
目ざといな。その注意深さを買ってキラはメンバーに入れたんだろ
The side eyes. Oh, he's getting that call right now.
う。波川だ。
エルです。
会議中にあなたからもらった電話が変だと気づいた者といるんだ。
なんだその電話？何か？
Go on, tell them.
エルだ。エル、ここに御堂と志村がいるが、キラに腹を立ててる口だ。
Okay.
何を言われても私のようにエルとキラの決着を見守るだろう。
The walls are closing in.
今夜キラを捕まえる。少し協力してほしい。樋口も終わりか。分かっていたのか。
Higuchi.
エルでも引っかかるんですね。今のあなたの反応で 100% 樋口になりました。
浪川ってやるね。あの人の顔はそこそこやると思ってたのミサ。
いいえ、八神
Yeah, he
君の
did.
失敗です。
Slipped up there.
そこにいない木だ。高橋、大井が何かしようとしたら止めてください。
ああ、わかった。
The voice changer.
やはり樋口だそうだ。
これで第二のキラ天音と結婚すれば死神の目も手に入る。そしてこの俺が四つ葉の全てを支配するのだ。
その中の一人がキラーなんですね。
はい、証拠もたくさんあるんです。
なんだこれは。どうせデマだろ。桜テレビだぞ。
それが一番最初に8人で会議していたところに遭遇したと言ったんだ。
会議のことを知っている者。
そのうちの一人が殺されて7人ね。犠牲になったのは H さんです。
H、羽鳥。ここまで知っているとなると他にあの会議を知っている者なんて。
Go on, think about it.
こいつ。あいつだ。ミサのマネージャーだった。確か松井。私は念のため家に帰ってから奴の名刺を見て名前をノートに書いて。
Ah.
なぜ生きてる？分かった。一度
He's
切るぞ。
sweating. Look at him.
正義のために殺されようと最後まで頑張ります。
いいぞいいぞ。
This guy.
あくまでもキラの発表は番組の最後まで言うんじゃないぞ。
Don't pick it up.
なんだおい。
Oh, he's panicking.
発表を決断するまではかなり悩みましたが。
コスメミサ。天使の輝き。
山陰にいるお前の親父から
また総務省に手を回して番組を止めさせよう。
No, no, no.
7人のうちの誰かがキラだから松井太郎は間もなく死ぬ。
そうか。松井太郎が本名でないと分かっているのはキラである俺だけ。それを言えばキラだということを
Bro,
話すことになる。
this guy.
明日の朝には帰ると。
Right. Acting manager, right?
と聞いてるんだ。
それがプライベートなので誰にも知られたくないと。申し訳ございません。明日には
The walls are closing in. He's cornered.
で だんだん聞き方がストレートになってきてるね、樋口のバカ。
余裕がなくなってきている証拠です。
Panicking.
本名は
確か山田。
山田。
山下。覚えてませんね。
ふざけるな。雇った人間の名前ぐらい覚えておけ。
なんですかその言い方。ちゃんとあいうえお順になっています。多分山下です。
番組の最後に言うのであればまだ2時間ある。
動くかな。
Okay. He's got a gun as well, though. Oh, it's reaching that point now. It's reaching that point. So far, so good.
必ず殺してやる。ここまで来て潰されてたまるか。俺は全てを手に入れるんだ。
I doubt that. He's lost it, man. He's lost it. Oh, great ending. Right then, episode 22. I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed the build-up and the conclusion of that episode. It was thrilling, high stakes, building towards a grand finale for sure, by setting up the potential for quiet and explosive situation. Higuchi is certainly starting to lose the plot, right? He did lose the plot. He started to panic, getting really frustrated, right? Agitated and desperate as the walls are certainly closing in. They're finally closing in, and it was only a matter of time before this was bound to happen. And because of all of this, because of the situation he finds himself in, he started to become quite reckless. As both Misa and Elle noted, right? The setup of the episode, or the structure of the episode, is an interesting one in the sense that, the first half is kind of them setting up a potential plan and going step by step in terms of how it's going to play out or how they expect it to play out. And then in the second half, it actually goes through that whole plan and it is playing out just how they expected it to play out. There could have been a different approach to this as well, I think it could have been cool if they actually show the plan just playing out, right? They show how Higuchi is reacting to all of this, and then you could have Elle kind of narrating it, right? As it's playing out. I think that could have been a cool approach to this. But yeah, it goes exactly how they planned it out. But yeah, by the end of the episode, he's in quite a manic state, right? And he grabs a gun and the Death Note. And, the gun certainly introduces another concern, right? Because he'll most likely become even more desperate in the next episode. And he might bring the gun into the situation, right? He could fire at someone, or he could actually then turn it on himself, right? And try to off himself rather than being caught. I could see that angle. But there is another angle to this as well, right? The Shinigami eyes deal. I said I could totally see him turning the gun on himself, but I could also totally see him taking the Shinigami eyes deal as a last resort. Earlier in the series, I mentioned that I could see Light maybe taking the Shinigami eyes deal if he finds himself up against it, right? Like a last resort type situation. And, here you have Higuchi, who is certainly up against the wall. And it's going to become even more desperate, right? The situation for him in the next episode. So, yeah, I could see him taking that deal. And you see that having the Shinigami eyes by his side and at his disposal, right? As part of his arsenal was certainly his intention, right? By marrying Misa. Much like how Light Yagami saw that opportunity through Misa's Shinigami eyes, a few episodes ago now, Higuchi was thinking of something similar as well. That here's an individual who already has the Shinigami eyes, so let me use them, let me manipulate them, let me utilize them, right? That was Light's original angle. Once he did find out that Misa is ready to do anything for him, and of course, Higuchi perhaps thought the same thing, but unfortunately for Higuchi, he's being played. But now he might have to take on the Shinigami eyes himself, though it's Rem who makes the final call on that, if she is going to make that deal. Yes, he can request it, he can ask for it, but, the Shinigami gets the final call on that, right? It's not really a genie in the bottle type situation, just because the human is asked doesn't mean it's a guarantee, it doesn't mean it's a given. So it depends how Rem looks at the situation, right? So yeah, Rem doesn't simply have to do the deal. She doesn't have to give him the Shinigami eyes just because he's asking for it. She could decline. I mean, she certainly doesn't like this individual, right? Given the threat he poses to Misa. So yeah, anything Rem does is going to take that into account. Take Misa's safety into account for sure. And I really think that this episode made it quite clear that Higuchi, or the type of person he is, was handpicked by Light, or at least suggested to Rem by Light, right? Mito described Higuchi as someone who lusts for success and power, right? And money, or power hungry, essentially. And then Namikawa stated that he doesn't really have those corporate people skills either, right? That he was demoted for this. So there's clearly a really specific type of personality here, right? And you see it is a bit different from the other members of the Yotsuba Corporation. Certainly the three they showcased in this episode. So I think it is possible that Lai wanted the Death Note to go to someone like this, right? He might have anticipated that this type of person was simply bound to slip up at some point, making any potential recovery plan a bit easier, right? Because of that. Given that he'll do anything, he'll become desperate to clutch to this immense power that he has. And once you become desperate, you start making mistakes, right? As depicted in this episode, Higuchi is making a lot of mistakes. He's quite reckless, and he's slipping up quite a bit, right? And he'll probably continue to do that in the next episode. So yeah, I could totally see Light Yagami having that part of his thought process. And in that sense, Higuchi isn't even really as intelligent or perceptive as some of these other Yotsuba Corporation members, right? Certainly the three they showcased in this episode. And I really like that there was a focus on some of these members in this episode. There's a charismatic Namikawa who actually made Light slip up, right, in getting a confirmation of Higuchi being Kira. So yeah, he's certainly charismatic and intelligent, right, and clever. Even Misa, she had a bit of a... Even Misa had to compliment Namikawa, right? She's like, I knew just by looking at him. And of course, he's presented as this really dashing, handsome individual as well, right? So again, it plays into that whole charismatic nature of this individual. And then, of course, the other two being Mito and Shimura. And, speaking of Shimura, I've noticed him over the past few episodes and his side eyes. And it makes sense, right? Because he is quite sharp and perceptive, as Namikawa noted. It's clear that Shimura really knows how to read a room and really take in his surroundings, right? So some of the other members might not even pay attention to something, yet he was paying attention to a lot of critical things. You'll see he's giving Higuchi some side eyes during some of those scenes. And then you'll see in this episode, he brings up the phone call that Namikawa got during one of their meetings, right? So he is picking up on these things, things that others are not taking note of or just ignoring altogether, right? That it's not registering. And, his concerns are understandable and actually quite realistic, right? This focus on the members definitely grounded them and humanized them, and made them much more believable, much more interesting for sure. And, I actually quite enjoyed those three characters and the scenes they had in this episode. Mito, Shimura, and Namikawa. Those three together, I really like that. I really did like that scene and the dynamic they had together. It appears that the Yotsuba Corporation arc or storyline is about to wrap up, right? That it is essentially reaching its conclusion, given how this episode's conclusion played out, right? And it was set up. Because Higuchi is about to go down, right? His downfall is imminent. I mean, that much is clear to see. It's been clear to see for some episodes now that, yes, they are going to bust them, or they are going to bust Higuchi at some point. The real intrigue comes from the aftermath of this, right? That's the really exciting bit. Once again, L reiterated that he wants to know how he kills before catching him, right? So the most important possibility that could come out of this situation is that L could potentially have the missing piece of the puzzle, the one thing he just didn't know about this whole time, right? Since the beginning of the series, the one thing that he just had no chance of knowing about, right? That was the one disadvantage he had. But even then, even though he had a bit of a handicap there of not knowing about this Death Note, supernatural Book of the Dead that can kill people, right? That his opponent, that his rival Kira has at his disposal, he still managed to get Light on the ropes. He managed to put him on the ropes, and of course that initiated this whole plan of his, right? Light's plan to put this grand plan, this potential masterstroke into motion, right? And that required him losing his memory. And then on that front, there is something quite substantial, isn't there? L certainly deduced that Kira's powers, right, can only move by the will of the person who has it. And, he put aside the notion that there's some sort of ominous presence or being that is controlling these people and they are responsible, or it is responsible for, passing these powers on, right? And of course, this came through this fantastic scene, actually, earlier in the first half of the episode, right? As he posed this hypothetical to Light. And Light gave him a definitive answer, a truthful assessment based on the premise of the hypothetical that was set up by L. I mean, at the end of the day, it's still Light, right? For L, it's always been Light. It's always been Light Yagami. And he clearly, certainly believes that, Light was Kira. And, he's certainly still kind of doing these tests. And this Light Yagami's truthful assessment of the hypothetical really actually kind of set a few things in stone for L, didn't it, right? He knows that it is the individual who possesses the powers of Kira who is responsible for relinquishing or passing on the powers of Kira, right? He notes the timing of the powers of Kira moving on from Light, right? He noted that it was unusually long before it passed on from Light. Especially if this ominous being in this hypothetical is trying to hide how the powers actually function, right? I don't think for a second that he's ever rejected that notion that it's always been Light Yagami, right? But of course, there's some complications. There's some interesting things that happen here. And, just a few episodes ago, he even brought up that the notion that, at some point, maybe Light Yagami planned out things so, he could potentially get those powers back. This whole thing is just a detour. At the end of the day, the main target, the main, aspect of this is always been Light Yagami for L. Though, I've got to say, I'm surprised that they didn't have L surmise that Misa's knowledge of the Death Note, or, he doesn't know about the existence of the Death Note, but, her Kira powers, the knowledge of that might have returned because somehow she knew to target Higuchi, right? By telling him she's the second Kira, by baiting him, right? Meaning she knew Higuchi was Kira, right? The current Kira, before any of them knew. And before trying this out. Because surely L surmised that, Misa is not going to try out something like that unless she knew for sure that Higuchi is Kira at the moment, right? Because there's like 7 members. She's not going to just randomly try, right? What if she tries and gets the wrong person? And then, there's a whole sort of other trouble here, right? All kinds of other problems open up here. Though that being said, L has noticed the change in Misa. That's for sure. He immediately clocked the change in her attitude in the last episode, right? Now, building on the discussion for the last episode, and that was a really enjoyable discussion because I really got to dig. I'm a big fan of rabbit holes. And trying to grab onto different angles and different tangents and really going deep into rabbit holes and mystery box type stories. So I enjoyed that quite a bit. But, building on that episode, if they do apprehend Higuchi and they do get their hands on that Death Note, all kinds of crazy things can start happening, right? Depending on if he's still alive as it happens or if he's dead. I think that part is really important because say he dies in a shootout, as a hypothetical, right? Though they are trying to catch him, at no point have they said that they're trying to kill him, but I am posing a hypothetical, a situation or an angle that finds Higuchi dead, right? So in this hypothetical, say he dies in a shootout. The first person to come in contact with that bag, and then, subsequently the Death Note inside the bag, then they become the owner of that copy, right? So that's quite important, isn't it? But, of course, that's not how they want it to play out. As I mentioned, they want to take him, right? They want to catch him alive. But before that, they do want to see, or, L really wants to see how Kira kills. Now, say they do catch him alive, and then someone handles the Death Note, right? Handles the bag and then finds the Death Note inside. Things become really interesting. Because for starters, Rem is going to appear to that individual, whoever ends up touching the Death Note. So that in itself presents such a chaotic potential, right? And given the nature of this story, I can't imagine that it's going to be, if someone does touch if someone, does get that bag and does grab the Death Note, I can't see it being some sort of red shirt, someone that's inconsequential to the story, because that makes no sense, right? Not at all. I think it's fair. I think it's really fair to assume that if it goes down that path and someone does grab the bag, right, surely it is going to be someone that is crucial to the story, right, or is someone that plays a part throughout the story. So people from the task force. But, that being said, I think I could say that I'm quite sure that there's no chance it could be L. Sorry, not L. There's no chance it could be Light that would touch it first. Because he's handcuffed to L, and L doesn't really go out in the field, does he? So yeah, there's no chance, I think, that Light Yagami, by chance, happens to be the first person to touch the Death Note if they do end up apprehending him and they grab the bag, right? And then, of course, the things in the bag become evidence in that situation if he is taken by the police or the task force. Though, of course, the task force can't really arrest him, right? Because they gave up those roles. So, of course, police has to get involved. But the most crucial aspect of this is that it's Light's copy. Again, this goes back to the discussion from the last episode, the whole, misdirect, the switched copies, that it appeared that she flew off with Misa's copy, but there was a clever cut, and there might have been some shenanigans off screen that they haven't shown us yet, right? And after that cut, you see Rem fly off, and they try to present that as, oh, okay, it's Misa's copy, as Light gave up ownership and gave to Rem, and then in the next scene they showed those people, Ryuk, Light, and Rem, they show Rem flying off. So it was a misdirect, a clever one, and it certainly got me, but I think I've cracked it in the last episode, given how a few things played out, right? The main thing being Misa not getting her memories back after being touched by the fragment of the Death Note, and as stated in the mid-episode card, that functions as it has the same function as the entire Death Note, right? The same effect as the entire Death Note. So yeah, it means if Light gets his hands on that copy at some point, his memories should return. So I think you can really see his train of thought here. Essentially, I think he anticipated that it could play out like this, and that he could have a chance to touch the Death Note, right? If they do end up apprehending this new selected Kira. And again, I mentioned earlier that it might have been a choice, right, to give it to someone like Higuchi, right? So you can kind of anticipate how far this individual is about to go, and the things they could do in desperation, making it easier to catch them and pinpoint who Kira is potentially, right? But there's still the matter of having Rem attached to this copy of the Death Note, the one Light used to have, the one he got from Ryuk, right? The one that had instructions in English. But the thing here is that for Light to potentially get his memories back, it doesn't have to be this copy. The other copy could do the same thing for him, right? It could return his memories, because after Misa had that copy, the one that belonged to Jealous originally, Light then had ownership of that copy. So even that copy should return his memories. But again, the interesting thing here is the switch, the fact that Rem is attached to this copy. So it appears that he made the choice to separate Rem from Misa, because that ended up becoming a problem, a massive problem for Light, before, putting any of these new plans into motion. So, in that sense, it's a bit of a no-brainer separating the two, given how protective Rem is of Misa. So let's build on that angle, the Misa and Rem protective nature, and, quite a problematic situation for Light. Let's build on that by bringing in this episode's mid-episode card. It's just straight up giving me details about how things play out if a Shinigami dies. And, I've already seen that play out. I've seen it in motion through Jealous, right? Or Jealous, sorry. Once he died, once he essentially saved Misa from dying from the Shinigami realm, he died and he turned to dust, right? This magical dust almost. And his copy remained. It stayed behind. And it just dropped. And of course, Rem happened to be the Shinigami that was right there. And she picked it up. And now she became the new owner of it. And then, of course, she goes to the human world and presents it to Misa. But, of course, you have to note the timing of this episode card, that they are bringing this to our attention, that they are giving this to the audience at this phase of the story, right? They're bringing it to our attention. So it's in the back of our heads or in our minds at this point. And also because they've already openly established the concept or the notion or the idea of how to technically kill a Shinigami, right? Misa was so happy to share that knowledge with Light Yagami the first time they met, or, the conversation they had in their room or in Light's room. So I can totally see the possibility that Light had a grand plan, right, to finally address the Shinigami Rem problem as well. And to do that, he would have to plan something out that forces Rem's hand, right, by putting Misa in a bad situation, right, some sort of bad situation. So once again, the possibility of some sort of masterstroke grows greater and greater by the episode. This is substantial. Right, this could be staggering, and like I said, that was such an effective misdirect in episode 16. There's clearly so much more than meets the eye. So yeah, I am excited. I am quite excited of Light's plan in all of this, his grand plan. And say if he does manage to get rid of Rem, right? Now all of this is only going to happen, or could potentially happen, if he gets his memories back. I personally, I've always felt and maintained that he is going to get his memories back at some point, that he's put this plan into motion only because he was confident in his plan, and that he knew that at some point he is going to recover those memories. But say if he does manage to get rid of Rem and solve that problem, her Death Note remains. It's just going to essentially stay there. And according to the info card, and of course as depicted in that scene with Jealous, the ownership goes to the next Shinigami, and that happened to be Rem at that point. The next Shinigami who touches it, right, who essentially picks it up. There's only one other Shinigami who is part of this story, Ryuk. But of course, for that to happen, Ryuk has to be there, right? If Rem potentially dies and goes out the same manner Jealous goes out, right, and turns to dust potentially, Ryuk has to be on the scene, or he has to be there. I mean, at the end of the day, he's this supernatural god of the death, right? A Shinigami. He can instantly kind of transfer, instant transmission, essentially, right? And then, of course, there's also the matter of the hidden copy, the one that's buried in the forest, right? Again, Ryuk mentioned, I never thought it's going to be thrown away, right? Like that. But again, Light corrected him and said, no, I'm hiding it. So there's still a copy out there in that forest, buried. So of course, clearly there's got to be some sort of recovery plan for that as well. I think that's about it for this episode. Actually, no, Matsuda once again takes center stage, right, as one of the crucial pieces of this plan. He's integral to this plan, actually. And as expected, he accepted immediately, knowing how crucial this is to this plan. So in that sense, yeah, he made a choice, but there was only really one choice to be made there, right? He had to accept it. Though, at no point did it feel like he felt cornered or forced. He took it upon himself. He accepted that almost immediately, right? To play his part, to do his part, to continue doing his part, and be an asset to the task force. So yeah, you gotta love Matsuda, man. Matsu. Gotta love him, really. I really enjoy him. I love that one shot of Light, and the shadow is this, devil-like being, almost kind of like a Shinigami, right? And, it's Light's shadow. I love that imagery and the symbolism of that. And I really like that commercial that came on, Misa's commercial. I thought it actually adequately described her, didn't it? Devilish charm and angelic glitter, right? There's certainly two sides to Misa as well. So yeah, I thought that was a nice little touch in there. Right then, I think that's about it. Great episode. Actually, quite a good episode. Great ending. And yeah, it sets up nicely for the next episode and the potential, grand finale of this Yotsuba story arc, Yotsuba Corporation arc. So yeah, if you enjoyed it, consider dropping a like, consider dropping some comments, give me your thoughts. And you know, if you're not subscribed and you do enjoy this and you enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. You know, if you're interested in early access to the next episode, or perhaps full length to this episode, consider checking out the Patreon page. It's just an option for anyone who's interested in content beyond the scheduled content. So yeah, you know, check that out, or just check out the plans for anime on the channel. Right then, that's about it for this one. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for your time, and I hope to see you again soon. Until then, take it easy.